welcome back to another spooky episode of my Halloween specials. Today we of course are joined by our amazing co-host for the last several years, Gengar, and as well as that, it's a Pokemon that I've had showing off in the last while. I just never actually get to show off a part of our collection, and that is Shed Ninja. So we can officially add Shed Ninja to our collection. So with that out of the way, welcome everybody, and it is finally here, the ending of the month, Halloween. It has been a very fun, adventurous, and well, spooky type of month. And after several different videos, just trying out new things and just kind of experimenting with this year, I am super happy to go back a few years to the past and redo one of the things that first started off in this channel. If y'all don't know, the first type of video I ever did for Halloween was a creepypasta reading. I've been in love with creepypastas ever since I was a little kid, and the year after that, I did a whole video about creepypastas. However, I thought it'd be very awesome to go back to the past and narrate a specific creepypasta. Now, we've done a Lost Silver before. We've talked about Hypno's Lullaby, Lavender Town, all of that. And we've also talked about this one we're going to be reading today. And tonight, we're going to be narrating and listening to Snow on Mount Silver. So turn the volume up, your lights down, and let's explore Mount Silver. So my brother and I, we kind of grew up on Pokemon. Around here, lots of kids did. It worked out perfectly for us too. Every time a new gen came out, one of us would get the new one and one of us would get the other. And since our mom liked to spoil, we both got the third one. This is going to sound at first like a bittersweet story about two siblings who grew up with a couple of games and eventually take them down different roads. Well, it's a little bit more than that. The years rolled by, we kept collecting. Game Boys got old, we replaced them. Cartridges finally gave out, we picked up new copies. But we started down two completely different roads before Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald came out. See, around then my brother got a Game Shark. We had heard all the hacks and cheats you could do with them. Even if they were kind of late to the party, they sounded awfully cool. Our first guinea pig was my brother's older blue version. We just ticked around with it a little bit, nothing major, but whatever we did messed up the cartridge. After just a couple of code entries, it glitched out and completely became unplayable. Naturally, we were upset at first. My brother mourned the loss of his hours of work, and I was sympathetic. I told him, it's okay, we can replace it, I guess. Stupid shark was a waste of money. But here's where our paths started to differ. After seeing the mess it had turned blue version to, I had become opposed to the idea of hacking and cheating on any of my games. What can I say? I'm a chick. I feel feelings for little pixel critters. At least with that Game Shark. But my brother had taken his game structure as a personal challenge or something. I don't think he ever played a game that which wasn't hacked somehow. Yeah, we played a shit ton of Pokemon, man. But for one of us, there really wasn't much else to do. We live way out in the country without many other kids. And farmers didn't want us on their property, so we played Pokemon out on our lawn just about all day, every day. It was pretty awesome to us, at least. We lost the Game Shark when our rooms got moved around. A new addition was built onto our house, and it disappeared in the mess of stuff that got stuffed into the new closet. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald arrived, and after playing them once, we were both in agreement they were definitely lacking in comparison to the last gen. We both tried another honest playthrough. And though we managed to finish, it left both of us yearning for some good old-fashioned nostalgia. Where were our gold, silver, and crystal cartridges, though? It probably took us months to dig through the boxes we'd been too lazy to open up before, but we finally found a shitload of our old electronics. My old purple Game Boy Color, still working. His red one could no longer hold batteries in place. Both of our GBAs were fine though, along with our snake-like and link cables. That one was a nifty little connector in the middle that I always wrapped up oh so carefully to avoid fraying the wires and condemning it into the trash like our other cables. We both grabbed everything we could. It's so nice to have Yellow, which had been my first and most cherished game of the series, not just Pokemon, and Red and Gold back. We went through the motion of checking our files, taking in all the old memories, and eventually we figured out the Gen 1 stuff was just too nostalgic to get rid of. I started Gold, he started Silver. Immediately, he snatched the Game Shark out of the box and slipped it back into his GBA. I just shook my head at him. I remember what I said to him. That thing will kill your game, you know. He had never liked me preaching about him abusing pixels, so I shut my mouth after that, but I put him off from playing with me. I guess it was just one too many or something. I ought to know to keep my thoughts to myself, really. It was a couple of days later that it happened. I was on my porch, Game Boy in hand, just about to go into the Elite Four, when I realized I needed a little bit of help. My team was ill-balanced, thanks to me playing through for leisure. And at the time, I was no great trainer that could pull off gimmick runs. I knew that my brother had been 2 batches ahead of me and since we last checked with one another, so I was hoping maybe he'd let me borrow a Pokemon or two, just for this run-through. Now the thing is, I had spent the last 24 hours at a friend's house. I had literally come home, dumped my bag in my room, and crept out into the sun to play my GBA again. I had no idea what he had been up to. For all I knew, he was done playing his game and onto a new one. Which I figured was all better for me since he didn't need those Pokemon, and I just had a better chance of making a few. So I got up and went into the house. And when I was crossing the living room, I noticed all of the Pokemon games lying on the floor. Some of the cartridges had been mangled, like they had been hacked out with something sharp. Even his old blue version, long ago dead and too sentimental to throw away, was lying with the plastic cut ragged, split almost halfway up on one side, completely unusable anymore, even if it had words. This had to have happened this morning. Otherwise, our mom would have seen, and I wouldn't be lying on the carpet. Tugging my GBA into my pocket, I crept over into his room and found the door unlocked. Somehow, that was even more concerning. I walked in and found my brother sitting on the edge of the bed, his GBA in pieces on the floor at his feet, smashed to bits. Next to him, the bed, were a hammer and our mother's gardening scissors. His face was paler than I'd ever seen, even whiter than the time we had gone corning and the old guy up the street, legally blind and ravaging nutcase, had come and chased us into the trees with a shotgun. It was now I had noticed the game shark on the floor, and a silver cartridge poking out under his bed. Somehow, they had been spared the wrath of the hammer. "Are you okay?" I asked. I remember the chills that ran through me. He was my little brother. Seeing him like this was horrifying. It was awful. I remember him rasping. The other way his voice rattled made my knees weak. Oh God. White everywhere. Then black. I remember running over and hugging him, and I remember his limp arm fell and brushed the Game Boy in my pocket. And his sudden scream right in my mirror, making me jump and bite my tongue by accident. He ripped the handheld from my pocket and hurled it at a far wall. I crowded out the dent the plastic system made there, running over to collect it. The screen had gone dark, and though I feared the worst when I flipped the switch on and powered up normally, I waited there in the corner trying to pretend the GBA mattered enough not to go and run for it, Mom. The volume was on. The Pokemon theme started up and he screamed again, picking up the hammer. This time I screamed too and ran from the room, my GBA clutched to my chest like a shield. He ended up in a psych ward at the hospital for 2 days. When we went to go visit him, I left my GBA at home. No one could figure out what had set this off, strangely mechanic behavior. There was some talk that I didn't understand at the time about some kind of disorder he may or may not have had. But even though my mom and I had collected and brought in all the cut-up cartridges to be looked at, Mom's idea, not mine. No one had even thought to tie it back to the game. Maybe that was my fault. I hadn't said a word about what happened when he had accidentally touched my Game Boy, or the blind white terror he had thrown into when the music had started. On my last visit to the hospital before school on the second day, I was left alone in my room with him while Mom had some private talk with the doctors about the precautions to take should this happen again. I sat in the chair next to the bed where he stared into the ceiling. Then he sat up, making me flinch. "Hey," he told me. "Angie, go in your room when you get home." I didn't understand what he meant, and then I remember the things he hadn't packed up and brought in. The game, the hacking tool, under the bed. Get rid of them. I don't ever want to play with them, ever again. His voice was so weary and desperate. He sounded like an old man on his deathbed. My poor damaged little brother. How could I refuse? "Promise you'll get rid of them." "Okay, I promise." I was carted off to school late, and through the whole day I only had my promise to him in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but it would be the last time that I could ever play the big sister role and help him out. I just had to get home and get rid of that game. But as the day went on, sick curiosity started to go through my own head. What could possibly have happened to scare him so badly? I was scared myself, but I had to know. I had to. I got home and went straight into his room, bent on uncovering whatever horror was waiting for me. Mom had since vacuumed the room and the cartridge and Game Shark were no longer visible. I got down and crawled half under the bed, feeling timid, but holding to the promise I had made my badge of courage. Under the bed, there was enough dust to make me cough. Enough old Legos and various other toys that I couldn't set my elbow down without it landing on something. But finally, I saw both objects. They'd been shoved up in the corner, on top of a notebook that looked too new to have been down there long. Unthinkingly, I grabbed the corner of the paper and dragged everything out with me, still wheezing from the dust. Allergies and all. It looked so innocent. Simple toys and simple spiral-bound bunches of paper. When I set Silver Version and the Game Shark on the floor, I took a closer look at the notebook. On it were scrawled on at least 20 different cheat codes, but one had been scratched up with Sharpie over and over and had literally been drawn in with a pen. This was confusing. He had really tried to erase it out. The marker had been pressed on the paper so hard that ink soaked through most of the pages behind it. Almost 2/3 of the way, the cardstock back cover, but pen has a way of sticking around. I picked up the notebook and tilted it backwards to the light, and the reflection surface of the Sharpie revealed the indents that had been left where he had written. The code was an unintelligible mess of letters and numbers, but the words next to it confused me. Easter egg. Snow on Mount Silver. I remember what he had said when I'd found him. He had been raving white and then black. Could he mean snow? Even though it was only August and the temperature was climbing to 90 degrees every day, a chill ran down my spine. Did I dare? I picked up everything and brought it to my room and laid it on the carpet in front of me and my own GBA next to it. For a long time, I just stared down at it, and the longer I looked, the more maniacal Lugia's face became a little sicker. Like some kind of twisted grin. Was it daring me to find out what happened to my brother? I was a 14-year-old kid. Did I really want to tempt fate and risk ending up like him? I glared down at Lugia for a while longer. I had to see. I slid gold out of my GBA and stuck silver in its place. It took me almost 15 minutes to compose myself and turn it on. It started up normally. I left the sound on too low, or too afraid of what I might hear to keep it up full way, and too curious to turn it on the whole way. The title screen was normal. Lugia again, but somehow menacing despite my common sense telling me it was exactly the same picture as every other time I had started the game. How bad could this be? I asked myself. His note said, Easter egg. Didn't that mean that it was a coding already in the game? The menu came up, still absolutely normal. His character was Blake, with a mostly filled Pokédex, but the time was odd. 99999. I knew he couldn't have been playing that long. I had already logged 50 hours on my own game when I was at the Elite Four. I was playing slowly. Probably the result of his hacking fucking up his file. I thought, well, whatever then. The game started up, and the first thing I noticed was the prolonged black screen. It took almost a full minute for anything to charge, and there was no sound at all. The hairs on the back of my neck was standing up already, but it was too late to turn back. Finally, a very dim sort of map came onto the screen, but it looked like static. What was going on? I squinted down and realized with a fearsome pang that it was actually the Mount Silver map. But what I had thought was static was heavy falling snow. So this is where it last saved his game. I checked his party. A very normal team for someone who'd been using a Game Shark. Typhlosion, Feraligatr, Meganium, Pidgeot, Tyranitar, Lugia. All level 100 modded moves. Typical for him. Something about the sprites were strange though. They seemed sullen in a way. Their color had seemed to wash out. Their expression lacked the usual vigor they normally had. I chalked this up to the missing pixel or something. Also, due to the hacking. The map had brightened up just a smidgen when I closed on the start menu. Indeed, snow was somehow falling very hard. Pixels danced across the screen so fast it was hard to see little sprites. That was my brother's character. Something was off about him too. When I checked the info, it was the same as the Pokemon sprites. The colors were dull. In fact, now that I thought about it, he almost looked frostbitten. My stomach tightened. I turned and tried to move back down the mountain. As I hit the bottom of the screen, words popped up, and there was finally a sound. My sprite hitting an invisible wall. I can't turn back now. That was unsettling. I went into my Pokemon and tried to use Pidgeot's fly ability. I can't fly in this, obviously referring to the snow. Fuck this, I thought, going into his bag. There was escape rope. I tried using it. I can't go back anymore. What was going on? Once again, I tried to walk down the mountain. Until my horror, the words changed with every attempt. I can't run away. I can't go back now. I can never go back. The last one sent a frigid feeling through my heart. There was no way down the mountain. I had to climb. Turning the little sprite around, I moved him forward. No resistance at all, though my walking speed was oddly slower. What was truly weird was the lack of grass, of trainers, and almost everything at all but white snow, which still blew across the screen and made it almost impossible to see. As I moved further up the mountain, his walking speed became slower and slower. The static curtains of pixels grew thicker so that I could barely make out the features of the map, but it seemed like the only way to move straight ahead. I reached what looked like a set of stairs at the very top edge of the screen, and I didn't remember this being there before. As I tried to move up, the little sprite paused. I'm cold. By now, I was getting goosebumps. His walking speed had become painfully slow, as if somehow he was being impeded. Up the little staircase, more text on the screen. Meganium has died. What the fuck? I thought Pokemon don't die in these games. I checked on my party and was frightened and confused at what I saw. Meganium's sprite had been replaced by a red X. All of the other Pokemon sported varying degrees of damage, though I hadn't battled once. I went into my bag and found a single revive and tried to use it. It's too late, it said. What kind of Easter egg was this? There wasn't much else to do. I tried to turn around, yielding the same message as before, so I kept on moving. Pidgeot has died. I checked again. Sure enough, there was a little red X. This time I selected it and looked at the Pokemon itself, trying to figure out what was wrong. God, I wish I hadn't. The sprite was mangled. Pieces of it were missing, and what was left was slotted with a sickish blue-gray color, and its eyes with a solid black pit. I flipped down to Meganium. Same deal. A missing leg, a chunk of its neck, most on its head, save that pitch black and dead eye. Morbid curiosity urged me onward. The path never deviated from the straight upward road I'd traveled this entire time. Along the way, every now and then another party member would die. An examination of the sprite would show that it was the same condition as the others, until all was left was Typhlosion. One more staircase was up ahead. I climbed it and braced myself for whatever horror awaited me. I hit the summit. It was deserted. Red was nowhere to be found. The snow had stopped falling. At the very center of the map was showing something sticking out of the snow. It looked like a Pokeball. Okay, maybe all this creepy shit led up to some climatic final back rule using was in there. I picked it up. Maybe Red would come out of hiding. I walked over and examined it. There was a burst of static noise from the game that made me jump. What appeared on the screen was a battle animation. My trainer sprite appearing, his skin tinged blue against another Pokemon's mangled sprite. It was Celebi. In the center of the black hole that was its eyes, a single red dot burned out like an ember, the thing looking rotten. I didn't even get to throw out my mostly dead Typhlosion before I had a chance to move. Celebi, Use Perish song. A screech came out of my Game Boy, and I had almost dropped it when the screen went white. A part of me was relieved, thinking that my final Pokemon had been KO'd and I would be transported to the Pokemon Center, but I was wrong. My sprite reappeared in what looked like a cave. Was I now inside the mountain? I checked my trainer's card and I felt sick. The sprite was just mauled as the Pokemon had been a leg on. A single eye remaining, pitch black and so on. So sad looking. Tears welled up at the corners, and every color of him was replaced with 6 shades of frosty blue and gray. Every stat on the card was reduced to 0. Except for the time, which still read 99999. I quickly moved back to the map. His sprite mimicked the horror had become on the trainer's card. Pieces were missing. Everything was discolored. I started trying to walk, and at first I received a message. It's so cold. There was only one direction to go. Upward. I moved on, and every now and then would be stopped by a message that made my heart sink lower and lower. Mother, it feels so cold. I can't go on. The walls, as I walked, became darker and darker until they were pitch black at the end. There was an exit there, marked only by a white outline.
I had no other choice but to go through it. It opened to the chamber, and there was an odd, solid white. The only way to distinguish the walls was a thin, gray line that marked them as separate from the floor. Against the far wall, there was another sprite. Red sprite. Intact. I had to come this far. I had to finish this. I walked up to him and hit A. Dot, dot. The battle started. Red Sprite had none of the deformities that married my own. The colors were the same, blues and grays, but he was intact. He just looked extremely sad. His first Pokemon came out, Venusaur. It was just like my own had been, but level 0. With a speck of health, I was out. I sent out Typhlosion, who had just 6 hit points left. No Pokemon made a sound when they were brought into battle. Venusaur, you struggled. There was no animation, just a single point of damage done to Typhlosion, and then the opposing sprite dropped off to the screen. Venusaur has died. There was no text asking me to switch out. Instead, there was what seemed to be dialogue from Red. Dot, dot, dot. His next Pokemon was Blastoise, even more mangled than Venusaur had been. It too struggled and died. After each round, there was that ominous dot, dot, dot from the trainer. Every sprite was more damaged than the last. His Espeon was barely distinguishable as a Pokemon. I realized somewhere he was sending them out, all out of order, which saved one Pokemon for last. Pikachu came out, and it was grotesque. It too was discolored, like it was frostbitten. It was missing an ear, half of its body and tail. Its head was mostly intact, but its eyes were much longer than it should have been, and glared at me with like pitch black windows into hell. But the thing that got me through the most was a giant smile that extended almost all the way into the edges of its mouth. Its health was somehow at 0, or at least it looked that way. My hands were shaking. I didn't even get a chance to attack. Pikachu used Pain Split. Pikachu has died. Typhlosion has died. It cut back to the image of Red Sprite, and now it looked like mine. With his body so butchered, it looked like a carcass stripped of most of its meat, except it had those same soulless, deranged eyes as Pikachu. I finally understood what happened. They were dead. They were dead, and at the sublevel of the mountain was the hell they now existed in. Red finally spoke. It's over. The screen flashed black and white for a moment. Used Destiny Bond. A horrible, hideous screeching started to issue from my Game Boy. The screen went white and it shrieked at me. I threw it to the floor and pressed my back against the bed. The horrible noise continued for several long moments while the screen stayed white. Then it went black. Then there was silence. It took me a long few moments, but I eventually stood up. I took the Game Shark, I took the notebook, and I took that fucking possessed game. I picked them up and carried them to the garbage can we had already set out in the morning to pick up. At the end of our long, winding driveway, I threw them in. When I got to the back of the house, I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up Yellow version and started it into my game. I think it was part of me determined to make sure I hadn't somehow been tainted as well. The music started up, the game played. I turned to my Pikachu and hit A. Its smiling face greeted me with its ear twitched and a big, pixelated smile. A pleasant, normal smile. I turned my game off and spent the next hour crying on the floor. My brother and I never played Pokemon again. He gave it up for good. I stuck to replaying my comforting on-hack games. That winter, the snow fell thick. Alright guys, I really appreciate y'all stopping by and listening to this video. It's been a lot of fun doing all these holiday specials. Sadly, some of these guys are going to be going back into the container because I have some special things going on soon. However, like I said, thank you guys very much for watching. I'm going to take a break, I believe, next week or the week after, maybe 2 weeks just all together. And then whenever I come back, we're going to come back and do Unova month for my birthday. So I'm super excited for that. Stay tuned for that and stay tuned for whatever we end up doing. But yeah, I'd like to thank y'all once more. And of course, I'd like to thank our amazing co-host Gengar for stopping by and giving us a fun month.
But that's gonna be it for me, guys. Thank y'all for watching, and I will see you next video.